Welcome back to a little bit of cheese, your bite-sized Wisconsin sports podcast. I'm your host, Cody Depuus. No Sam today. He'll be back on Friday. A tough loss yesterday for Sam. He actually texted me today and said he does not want to talk about the Bucks for a couple of days. So he's going to get the day off today. And if you've been following along, you know that today is Wednesday, and we're usually on Monday. But there is some wacky weather going on the west side of the state on Monday. So Sam and I were kind of just getting prepared for that and taking care of that. But we are back this Wednesday, and we'll be back on Friday, of course, as well this week. But the big news, of course, the Bucks losing to the Pacers yesterday. We'll get into that over the course of the show. The Brewers, they've had a tough run last weekend, losing a series 2 out of 3 to St. Louis, but they do win the first one of a set at Chicago, taking on the White Sox. They had a 7-2 victory last night. Freddie Peralta pitched a good game there and really good offense all around to put up 7 runs. But the news that we're going to start with, of course, is the Packers draft class. We talked about the first-round pick with Matthew Golden. Sam and I both shared our thoughts. It was probably the right pick. We probably all understand that Aaron Rodgers is punching air somewhere, knowing that Green Bay picked the first wide receiver in the first round since 2002, being Javon Walker. But the Packers did it, and we'll just kind of bring it back to light once again. Golden has a lot of potential. He's very young. We're not going to expect a lot of him right away, but I think he's a player in 2 to 3 years that can really contribute to this team at a very high level. I think this first year is just going to be a lot of a learning curve for Matthew Golden. Probably not going to be a Pro Bowl campaign, but you are going to see him be a key player on this offense, just not the key player, if that makes sense. I believe they're going to show a lot more trust in the guys that have been there. Your Jaden Reeds, your Romeo Dobbs, your Tucker Crafts, even maybe Dontavian Wicks gets more targets again this year. I mean, he led the team in targets last year, whether he deserves it or not, but he did, and he's probably going to see more than Matthew Golden this year. He's going to be a developmental player, and I'm going to be excited to see it. You've seen all the talent, all the tape, body control. His route running is really crisp. I think he has great hands. I think he's going to be someone who, if he can figure a way to get off the line, regardless of his size, he's a little bit undersized at wide receiver. If he can find a way to get around that with his footwork, I think he could be a really solid player in this league. So that, of course, the first-round pick for the Packers, Matthew Golden, wide receiver out of Texas. In the second round, big surprise. My reaction was not where I saw it going. I was thinking they might go cornerback. Trey Amos is still on the board out of Ole Miss, but the Packers went offensive lineman Anthony Belton. This is a monster of a human being, 6'6", 336 pounds, but his feet very good. He moves well. He's a pure athlete. He's someone who actually said he prides himself on his physicality and his athleticism, this being Anthony Belton, the offensive lineman out of NC State. I think this, and I've been hearing this from a lot of Packers talking heads going around, I think this is kind of showing the way that Green Bay wants to take this offense. Before he used to have his own blocking scheme with Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams, and even when he got into the A.J. Dillon days, kind of the more small but athletic offensive lineman that can move a lot of different positions. Well, I think you have versatility here in this pick with Anthony Belton, but you also have a lot of size. And you saw this kind of coincide with the move that they made in free agency, signing Aaron Banks, one of the biggest offensive guards in the National Football League. They are adding size to this offensive line, and I think Anthony Belton, at least from the way that it sounds on articles online, I think he's going to compete at guard. I think they want him to take that right guard spot from Sean Ryan. And then I think the left tackle spot is not going to be up for competition for Anthony Belton, but I do believe that Jordan Morgan, if you remember Green Bay's first-round pick from last year, I think he's going to be the guy that's going to get an opportunity to compete for that starting role against Rasheed Walker. So we'll see how that plays out. I love seeing versatility on this offensive line. This is a trenches draft. It's, like I said before in the first time that we talked about it last Friday, not a sexy draft, but this is a foundational draft where you start to build these pieces. This is one that, like, you start to build your franchise like a Philadelphia Eagles or Detroit Lions. You're getting those guys on the line, and you're going to see that be a theme here for the Packers over the course of this 2025 draft. Round 3, I'm going to say it, this one is my biggest head scratcher. Wasn't quite sure. I didn't know who he was before they picked him, but when you go back to the tape, you can kind of understand as to why. But the third round pick at 87, Green Bay goes wide receiver, running back, gadget player out of TCU, Savion Williams. If you haven't watched any of his tape, I'd recommend you go do so, especially if you're a little bit frustrated about this pick. This is a super athlete. 6'4", 225 pounds, runs a 4.38 speed. They think he's even quicker than that. And if you watch the tape, you're going to believe that as well. This is a kid that they've played at running back, they played at wide receiver, and they played many times at Wildcat, which is essentially a quarterback that's not really going to throw the ball, even though they did have him throw the ball a little bit, just not like a pocket passer scenario, but more of a run-pass option scenario for Savion Williams. He's a very good athlete. I think he played high school quarterback. He's someone you want the ball in their hands. So the super athlete, he's going to jump over people. He's going to have the spin moves. I expect him to return kicks for Green Bay. He's one of those guys that is that dangerous when he touches the ball. The biggest problem that I have with this pick is, and this is the reason why he fell to the third round, or probably the reason he fell to the third round, really struggles catching the ball downfield. There are a lot of drops here from Savion Williams. I expect a lot of end-arounds with him. I expect for him to be sitting out in the flat and a couple of packages here for Matt LaFleur, but this is definitely a Matt LaFleur player. He's a guy that LaFleur probably wishes he has on every single roster. Someone who can play multiple positions, someone who has electric speed, great for the end-arounds, and is just dangerous with the ball in their hands. So I understand it from that standpoint. And when it got to this point in the draft, there really wasn't a whole lot in terms of defensive tackle or cornerback, which was probably Green Bay's biggest overall needs at this point in the draft. Could they have traded down? Yes. Are they making their head coach happy by going drafting his dream player? Also, yes. Savion Williams, he's going to be a Packer. He's going to be exciting. I'd imagine if there aren't drop issues or fumble issues, this guy's going to be a fan favorite. And if there aren't those issues, he's probably going to be a really solid player in this league. I foresee the hands being a little bit of an issue. Like I said, go back and watch the tape. You're going to see the highlights. The highlights are incredible, but the bad is pretty bad. Like a 5-yard out route where he's wide open, has it hit him right in the hands, and he just can't come up with it. And that happened on multiple occasions over the course of his college career. So the hands, they're a problem there like they've been for the Packers in the past year. Of course, Green Bay up in the top 3 and drops. Some places have them as the worst team in terms of dropping the football. So not really helping in that scenario for Green Bay, but you're adding another weapon, another guy who's just very dangerous anytime he touches the ball. I'm excited to see what he can do. I think he's probably going to make a play in preseason. He's going to get guys really excited. And then the regular season, you're probably going to find out why he fell to the third round. I've seen a lot of comparisons like Cordero Patterson, who was a guy drafted in the first round, was supposed to be a superstar, and he made a lot of great plays over the course of his NFL career. I believe his career is actually still going. Of course, not as effective now as he was probably 10 years ago. But I think Savion Williams can bring an impact like that to a roster. He's a big kid. He's very fast. All the athleticism is there. He has all the God-given talent that you could ask for as an offensive skill position player. So I think the ceiling is very high for him. I also think that floor is an unplayable player. But we're going to see what happens with Williams. I just know that Matt LaFleur is very excited to get him into camp to see what this kid can do on the field. Fourth round, I think this is everybody's favorite pick. And of course, Matthew Golden, that's the one that we're all going to remember. That was the special moment in the first round where Mark Murphy went out there and he made the announcement. But this is a pick where a lot of people are saying is going to be the one that we go back and say, this was the home run in the middle rounds for Brian Gutekunst. Baron Sorrell was actually sitting there on day 2. He was in the draft room the entire day and was not picked. He was a day 3 pick, but Green Bay went out there and they got him there. An edge player from Texas. This is a big, big, strong kid, very talented off the edge. And where a lot of people just love this kid is his personality. He was a guy, and you can go back and watch the videos of him sitting day 2 in that draft room. Every single guy, I think he went up and handshaked and hugged as they were walking up to the stage to get there, as they had their name called and they had their name announced. Barron Sorrell is a team player. You've heard it from Matthew Golden. They thought that handshake was going to be the last time that they saw each other in a while, and now they're both going to end up in Green Bay. Everybody loves this kid. A-plus guy, very talented, very strong. I think he was 3rd overall in the bench press. Just a super strong kid. All the talent is there, and he got to have that special moment. Roger Goodell actually called his name on day 3, which does not happen very often, but Goodell knew that he waited all of day 2 to hear his name called. Did not happen, so he stuck around day 3, got his name called, got to do his ceremonial Lambeau leap. He got to do a press conference. I love the opportunity that this kid is going to have. It seems that he's very happy to be a Green Bay Packer, and he's going to fill a position of need. Of course, Lucas Van Ness, Rashawn Gary, Kike Enagbare, they need to fill depth in that room, and that room needs to really execute at a higher level. And I think Barron Sorrell is at least going to help push these guys. They kind of went back-to-back here, piggybacking off the 5th-round pick, Colin Oliver, another edge player out of OK State. This is a smaller, twitchier player, also very talented. Kind of gives you a little bit of a different look of the type of player that's going to be off the edge for the Green Bay Packers this year. But I think the talent's there. I love that they went out and tried to stack this position as they're showing that it is a position of need. We saw that last year. This just overall makes the team better to get this room even deeper. Colin Oliver, I love the pick, an edge player out of Oklahoma State. In round 6, this is where they look and focus at defensive tackle. Warren Brinson is the pick out of Georgia. Sounds like he's a big, strong kid who was going to get picked regardless in this draft. He's going to end up in Green Bay, and he starts to fill a need in terms of the fact that that room is a lot thinner. No pun intended there. But TJ Slayton is going to be a Cincinnati Bengal. There's one other guy that's going to be needed in the middle of that defensive line. Warren Brinson is going to get some opportunity, possibly as a rotational player. And we'll see how Kenny Clark's career continues, as you saw a little bit of a dip last year. He's not getting any younger. Yes, we understand that it was a new scheme, but he had all 17 games to go and improve, and we didn't see a whole lot of that last year. And once you start to get to age 30 as a defensive tackle, very rarely do those guys stick around. So I love Kenny Clark as a player, great Green Bay Packer. It's just I don't think you can expect that Pro Bowl type of player from him anymore. Warren Brinson filling that position group at defensive tackle. The 7th-round pick, Micah Robinson, cornerback out of Tulane. Don't know a whole lot going on here, of course, getting into the 7th round, but Robinson said, quote, "I'm a ball hawk." You need position group depth, that cornerback. Robinson's going to help fill that. He's going to get to compete with those guys that are already there, and it's just a position that needed to be picked. I wanted it to be picked earlier, but 7th round, I guess we're going to have to take it. And the last pick of the draft for Green Bay in the 7th round, John Williams, adding some more depth as an offensive lineman out of Cincinnati. Another really big kid. He can move. He played a lot of offensive tackle. They think he can play guard as well. Because my overall thoughts on the draft, I'm pretty neutral here. It's hard to grade any draft, to be completely honest. You can go back and look at years past, and I believe the draft that Green Bay picked Amari Rodgers. I saw so many people out there saying that this is the best draft that they had seen since '09, and that was the draft that they went out and they got B.J. Raji, Clay Matthews. I believe Brian Bulaga was in that draft. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but the '09 draft, a lot of people remember, is the one that really put Green Bay over the edge to go and win that Super Bowl in 2010. People were comparing that draft to that, and that draft class ended up being horrible. Amari Rodgers was definitely a net negative and not a lot of impact from the other players in that draft. So that's kind of just my point to saying with any draft class, And I'll say especially this one, as I don't think you're going to see as many superstars or Pro Bowlers or Hall of Famers out of this class. And I could be wrong, but I don't think that high level talent was really here in this class, maybe in the top 10 picks. And there'll be a couple of studs that show up in the later rounds, as they always do. But it's hard to judge any of this. I'm going to say personally, I wish they would have went cornerback earlier. I think that is that much of a need. I wish a defensive tackle could have been picked earlier. But in Cody, we trust to this point. I mean, if he hits his first-round pick, that kind of gets the monkey off of his back. Where since Jair Alexander, Green Bay hasn't really hit any home runs in the first round. If Golden can be a Pro Bowl level player at some point in those first 5 years as a Green Bay Packer, I think you consider that a hit, and that kind of takes the monkey off of Gutekunst's back. We'll see if that happens, but I love the Belton pick in hindsight. There are a couple of ways that they could have went, and yeah, Belton was projected as a third or fourth rounder on a lot of draft boards, but what I'm hearing from a lot of people is that after Belton, the offensive line depth really fell off. So Green Bay was kind of just taking their guy that they liked, that had the versatility and that had the size that they're trying to move that offensive line more towards. The point that my boss, John Papadopoulos, on ESPN Lacrosse brought up was the fact that the more size that you add to this interior offensive line, the less impact that Josh Jacobs has at that line of scrimmage, and the more you can prolong his career. This is a move for Anthony Belton that Green Bay is just moving towards that ground and pound. Let's run between the tackles. Let's give him a little bit more space. We are handing Josh Jacobs the keys to the offense. And that's not to say that Jordan Love isn't going to have the expectations that he needs to, because those are definitely going to be there. This team's going to throw. You also picked 2 wide receivers in this draft too. You're just making your offense better from so many different levels. You already know that your tight ends are taken care of. You know your center's taken care of, which with Elton Jenkins and Malik Monk, who is their draft pick, I believe, from last year that they really like. Your offensive line is solid. You knew you could improve, and that's what Green Bay tried to do here in this draft. Wide receiver, did you need anybody? Probably not. Did you go out and get your guys? Yes, you did. You also got your project player in Savion Williams. The offense, I think they added a whole lot of capital to that room. The defensive side, it was the whole back end of the draft aside from the last pick. I love the 2 edge players that they got. I love bringing Brinson and Micah Robinson. Haven't heard a whole lot of, and I hope that I do a whole lot more, because Green Bay needs somebody that can cover a number 1. Maybe that guy is already there. Maybe Jair Alexander is coming back, and everyone that I'm hearing in Packers talking circles is wrong, because most people don't think that he is. But possibly he is. The way that Green Bay drafted says that there's a chance that Jair is coming back, because without him, you saw that defense at the end of last year. Not that it was terrible. I mean, they held Philly to 22, but you need someone that can cover an A.J. Brown, and I'm not sure that guy's in Green Bay right now. Maybe he is. I hope he is, and I hope he's on the roster when it comes to training camp, and we'll see if that guy's Jair Alexander, but I'm not going to hold my breath on that. I know there are a couple of free agent options out there as well for Brian Gutekunst to go and pursue, but it's kind of just a wait and see from this point, because they did not focus on cornerback in the draft. So that's my biggest bone to pick, but overall, going to be excited. These are a bunch of young guys that you're going to learn about for the next 5 years as Green Bay Packers, and always excited to do that immediately after the draft. The bad news from yesterday, and the reason Sam did not want to talk about the Bucs today, of course, the bad loss. They were down 3-1 to Indiana. They had, I believe, a 6-point lead with 34 seconds left to go in overtime, and they ended up losing it. Tyrese Halliburton and the Indiana Pacers moving on. The other big news that you haven't heard about on this podcast at the least, but have probably heard about in some capacity, is Damian Lillard in Game 2. No, it would have been Game 3. He tore his Achilles. So, of course, missing the rest of this series and probably a good chunk of next year as well as Milwaukee Buck. A lot of bad news, and that Damian Lillard loss kind of just adds to those Buck injuries that continue to pile up. You go and look back at the last 7 years as Bucks fans, except for the championship that they've won every single year there's been a crucial injury that you feel has really hindered Milwaukee's championship chances. And I'll be the first guy to say I know I'm very up and I'm very down on this Bucks team. I remember when they started out 2-8, I was at a point where this team is not good. I don't see an opportunity here. I think they're too old. They're slow. And they went out and they made a couple of changes. They brought in a Kevin Porter Jr. They brought in a Kyle Kuzma. Whether or not that's a good thing, I don't even know how much it is up for debate. I think at this point you would probably rather have a Chris Middleton, but Kuzma's on the roster. He's younger and a little bit quicker than Middleton at this point at the least, but the offensive player that you were hoping for didn't really show up down the stretch for Milwaukee. You got Jericho Sims, who ended up being an athletic big, who gave you a lot of crucial minutes down the stretch and actually played a little bit in the playoffs as well. But other than that, with the roster, things don't look good for Milwaukee looking towards the future. This series really stunk. Even if Milwaukee would have been able to pull off a miracle, I mean, they were down 3-1 going into yesterday. I mean, if they would have won that game, still 3-2, take it back to Milwaukee and see what happens. But your chances of even getting past Indiana those next two games, extremely slim. And I'll tell you, for the rest of the playoffs, not a lot of expectations from my side of the board. I mean, you probably would have played Cleveland next round. That would not have went well. Boston was going to stomp you. And I don't think Indy is that good of a team, really. And they kind of gave it to the Bucks. I mean, a 5-game best-of-7 series victory, kind of dominance. Yes, Damian Lillard went down with injury. I don't even, it's hard for me to say because I know how important Damian Lillard is, how great of a player he's been over the course of his career. This team was very inconsistent this year. And to be a real championship contender, I don't know how inconsistent your team can feel. And even when Damian Lillard was on that court, I'm not sure if it was there. And maybe this is me listening to the rest of the talking heads around the NBA. I know Sam is a big optimist about the Milwaukee Bucks. That's his ride or die, kind of where the Milwaukee Brewers are my ride or die. But the future does not look extremely bright here for this Milwaukee Bucks team. You don't have any draft capital. You don't have any salary cap space. You're missing one of the top 20 players probably in the NBA, and Damian Lillard for a good chunk of next year, maybe even all of next year. Achilles injuries are kind of a big question mark as to when somebody's going to be back. We have no answers on that. Just tore it this week. Giannis isn't getting any younger. He might be getting better. I think this is the best player that I've ever seen with my own two eyes. He went 30, 20, and 10 in that closeout playoff game. And his numbers, and I actually sent this to Sam, but his last 8 games in the playoffs, as I pull up this statistic here on the good old cellular device, the Bucks are 1-8 in the last 9 playoff games Giannis has played, dating back to Game 6 versus Boston in 2022. He has averaged 30 points, 14 rebounds, 6 assists on 54% shooting in those 9 games. And that kind of statistic sucks. We all love Giannis Antetokounmpo. As great of a player as he is, I think he might even be a better person. He makes your entire city better. I don't know, and that maybe I don't want to be the guy that says this because I have a little bit less bias when it comes to it. Maybe that means that I'm more pulled and more susceptible to anti-Milwaukee propaganda when it comes to the NBA or any national media talking about sports. If Giannis is going to leave Milwaukee, I think it's going to be this offseason. I will have this conversation with Sam when it comes to Friday, but I really do believe that Giannis Antetokounmpo loves Milwaukee. I think he loves the Bucks. But I do have to say, the players that you think that are loyal, money can find a way to sway. And it happens more times than not. And maybe Giannis is one of those extremely loyal players that turns down a check, whether it be from the Knicks or the Lakers or Golden State or wherever it may be, any larger market that would happily take a Giannis Antetokounmpo. And to be honest, any team would, but I think that the real pull would be from the big market teams. And I think that's where the NBA would love for Giannis to play. I don't think they love Giannis playing in Milwaukee, but Milwaukee got lucky when they took that tall, skinny kid out of Greece with the 15th overall pick just over 10 years ago. And they hit a home run with probably one of the top 10 best players of all time. And he's played in the small market this entire time. You know there's going to be a push from the NBA in some way to get Giannis out of Milwaukee. And I don't want to get conspiracy theories out here either, but I don't know if this Bucks team can give Giannis and bring him to his full potential in terms of team success. And yes, I know that team success is a variable thing here. Kevin Durant has a couple of rings. He had to go leave Oklahoma City and go to Golden State to go do so. Giannis could take the cheap route and go play for LA and play with Luka and LeBron next year and go win a probably easy ring. We'll see what happens. I would love for Giannis to stay in Milwaukee for the rest of his career, but it's at that turning point where I don't think Doc Rivers is coming back. You don't have any first-round picks until 2031. You have very little draft capital. You have very little trade capital. And the Milwaukee Bucks as a team, there is a chance that John Horst looks at this and says that the championship window is closing. This Bucks team has no capital. We need to start to rebuild that back before we start the dark years for the next 15 years of this franchise. And they trade Giannis for a bunch of capital. I hate throwing that out there. It makes me sad to even think about that. But after a loss in a series like that and the amount of bad luck that Milwaukee's gone through, I would be surprised if there's not a thought of change going on in that locker room and in that front office. This offseason is going to be very difficult for any Bucks fans. You can just search up Bucks right now in Google, and I bet you 4 out of the 5 articles they show you are talking about the possibility of Giannis Antetokounmpo getting traded in the offseason. This might be that point. This might be the beginning of the end of the Milwaukee Bucks. Maybe we've already seen the beginning, but this is kind of that turning point where Milwaukee needs to make a decision and Giannis needs to make a decision about the future. What does next year look like? Because that might dictate the next 5 or 6 years of Giannis's career and the Milwaukee Bucks franchise as a whole. They have invested a lot into keeping Giannis, surrounding him with a Damian Lillard and a couple of other players and moves that they have made that haven't worked out probably to what they were hoping, but they have invested a lot to the point where they don't have a lot of cap space. There's no draft capital. They can't draft anybody anyway, so not that it feels like that matters, but draft picks help you bring in other players. And right now they're at a point where they just got knocked out by an indie team that I was hearing from many people that Milwaukee should beat them regardless of if they have Damian Lillard or not. And they lost 4-1 in this series. So kind of a sad point, a sad thought, a turning point here for the Milwaukee Bucks. But we'll have to see where everything happens from here. Of course, we all hope that Giannis stays in his career, stays his entire career in Milwaukee. But I will say, and I'll throw this out on the table, I know Sam would slap me if he heard me say this, I would be happy to watch Giannis win another ring, regardless if it was with the Bucks or not. I really would say that. And I would be happy. Yeah, it would suck it's not wearing a Milwaukee Bucks uniform, but I'm at this point where I don't know if the Bucks can give Giannis really what he deserves going forward. So maybe my lack of fandom is giving me the opportunity to say that, but those are the kind of thoughts that are going through my head after a loss like that. Another quick point that I want to bring up, and kind of to show how great of a character Giannis is, and maybe how poor of a character Tyrese Halliburton's dad is. I'm sure you've seen it, but if you go online, you look up Giannis and Halliburton, there's press conferences and quotes from both of these players. At the end of the game, right after Tyrese hit the game-winning shot in overtime, John Halliburton, that would be Tyrese's father, went up to Giannis and started shaking his Tyrese Halliburton t-shirt in front of Giannis and saying, "This is what we effing do." And I'm not quite sure all the words that he said. Giannis wouldn't tell us, but apparently they were pretty disrespectful because Giannis actually came out and said that they were disrespectful. And for Giannis to go and say that means that you definitely crossed the line somewhere. And if I were you, I would go listen to Giannis's press conference. And Tyrese Halliburton actually came out and had his own press conference and said that he thought his father was in the wrong. So it was unprofessional at that point. And I also have to say, I think the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. Tyrese Halliburton, I've seen on a lot of occasions, also extremely cocky. He waited to start talking smack in Game 3 until, the Bucks were winning that game, I believe, until Dame blew out his Achilles. And then right after that, Pacers take the lead, and then Tyrese Halliburton was out there talking smack for the rest of the game. He was actually rated the most overrated player in the last offseason, I believe. And after this win, a first-round win where the Pacers beat a battered Bucks team that was missing their second-best player to an Achilles injury, tweeted, still overrated, or something along those lines about him being overrated and the fact that he shouldn't be overrated. And my only response to that is, if a first-round victory in the playoffs means that much to you, I don't know if you need to be talked about in the sense of overrating or greatness, because you haven't reached that point yet. And Tyrese Halliburton is not, but he sure acts like he has. And Giannis even said in that press conference, talking about Tyrese's father, "I've won a championship. You guys haven't. I think being humble is a cool thing." And I as well think being humble is a very cool thing. I think humility and being humble, humility and being humble, I think those are two things that are very highly touted by a lot of franchises, and I think that's the big reason as to why Shedeur Sanders fell all the way to the 5th round. We haven't even brought that up in this podcast yet, but that, of course, was the story of the draft. I don't think Shedeur is showing any humility in his interview processes, and that's the reason that he fell that far. And I think it should be a very highly touted thing. I think it is. I don't see a lot of it from Tyrese Halliburton. Kind of sad to say because he is from Wisconsin. He's a Oshkosh native, but he's kind of become a villain within his own hometown state lines. And you kind of saw it with his father last night. Cockiness is definitely there. It runs in that blood. And John Halliburton, with the kahunas to step in the face of Giannis Antetokounmpo and start to talk smack, shame on you. Kind of disgusting, very unprofessional. I'm glad that Tyrese came out and said that his dad was in the wrong. That doesn't make this any better. Whatever. Giannis is able to shake it off. That's fine. He had his own words about it, and I think Giannis also handled it perfectly if you want to go back and look at that last press conference that he had talking about the situation. But John Halliburton, not really showing a lot of humility or a lot of respect to one of the game's greats, in all honesty. And you're going to talk smack to one of the players who's one of the nicest guys on the court, one of the nicest people that you've ever met, a guy who has done so much for the city and for your home state, actually, and you're going to go talk smack to that guy. And I think Giannis plays a much more respectful game of basketball than your son does, but as John Halliburton showed, he doesn't really care about that because he doesn't care about himself showing any respect or humility to the game of basketball. So I would go and read into it. You can make your own opinions, but we'll see how far Indiana goes. I hope they get absolutely blown out in the next round and they get smacked right back in their face, because that's usually what happens in a league like this. And John Halliburton kind of has it coming for his son's team at this point. I know he's not on the team, But he's there, and that's a whole story that's going around. You disrespect Giannis Antetokounmpo, can't imagine that there would be any good karma coming on your side. Just the last point here, the Milwaukee Brewers, they have been up and they've been down this year. They sit exactly at 500 right now, 15-15. They beat the White Sox last night. A good start from Freddie Peralta. Went 6 innings and gave up just the 2 runs. Both those actually back-to-back home runs in the first inning. So Freddie able to settle down after that rough first. Got the victory. The offense is cruising. Garrett Mitchell is headed to the DL, has actually been on the DL. I believe it is a left oblique strain. Just the 15-day. It stinks. I hate watching him go down all the time, and it sucks that it's always something different as to why he goes on the IL. But Garrett Mitchell is hurt again. Guess who? That's pretty much what happens anytime anyone goes to the IL. It's probably Garrett Mitchell at some point, and we see it once again this year. And I think it was a broken hand last year or something like that. Like every part of his body, I feel like, has gotten hurt over the course of his young career so far in Milwaukee. And a player who I think has all the potential in the world just can't stay on the field. And that sucks to see. But Brewers are starting to get a little bit healthier in the pitching staff. Tobias Myers pitched last week. Actually was handed the loss. Actually, no, he was not handed the loss against St. Louis. Abner Uribe was, but Myers will be on the mound for his second start again tonight at Chicago, taking on the White Sox, and Chad Patrick will be on the bump tomorrow. That'll close out the series against the White Sox. Brewers, opportunity to go sweep it. Would love to see that. The White Sox, of course, historically one of the worst teams that we've ever seen, at least last year. The Brewers an opportunity to get above 500 and creep a little bit closer to the Chicago Cubs, who are first in the NL Central and will be heading to Milwaukee to take on the Brewers at AmFam Amphitheater this weekend. I think that's going to do it for us today on this Wednesday. Sam and I will both be back on Friday. We'll get his thoughts on the Bucks. Hopefully he's able to get through it. I know a lot of emotions here for his Milwaukee Bucks. And I would love to hear his rebuttals on all of everything that I said about Giannis Antetokounmpo and the possibilities of what happens in the future for both him and the franchise. We'll ask a little bit more about the Packers draft class as well. Of course, we'll always talk some Brewers. My name's Cody Depius. I'd like to thank you for being here with us once again today. We'll see you once again on Friday for another edition of A Little Bit of Cheese, your bite-sized Wisconsin sports podcast.